Hey there, welcome to the Flute 360 podcast. I'm Dr. Heidi K. Begay, and I'm a flutist, educator, coach, and podcaster. My God-given mission is to serve you. I am passionate about guiding you, the modern-day flutist, to discover your unique voice on and off the stage. The goal of this podcast is to help you thrive, both as an artist and as a musicpreneur. Go ahead and grab some espresso, your favorite notepad, and let's get to it. Today's episode 228, part 2, is titled, How You Can Make Your Own Musical Opportunities with Serena Huang. Hey, music friend, it's Heidi here, and I'm so excited that you have tuned in to another Flute 360 podcast episode. So, friendly reminder, this episode 228 is part 2 of a 2-part series. So if you have not listened to episode 227, you definitely want to check it out because then this portion will make more sense. Serena Huang guides you through her musical journey, the ups and downs, and she offers you tips and tricks in order to navigate your unique musical path. Definitely listen to both parts because it will serve you well. In other news, as a friendly reminder, you know that Garrett, Arthur, and myself have been co-organizing an upcoming event, and it's called the Ultimate Music Business Summit. Now, for the next 2 days, you can get 25% off of your UMBS ticket. So go to musicsummit.biz, and whether you claim the student ticket, the basic ticket, or the VIP ticket, you can get 25% off your UMBS ticket. So you want to use the code December25, that's December25, for the 27th and the 28th to claim your discount. Again, if you can go down to the show notes below, click the links to make it easy peasy. I have provided all of those notes below. Thank you and enjoy. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that's why I also love this tech world that I'm kind of in with my husband being in co-owning an audio video production company and his tech world. And then me dabbling. I built my first HeidiKBegay.com website was DIY'd completely. No, I mean, if you would have told younger Heidi, high school Heidi, 20 years ago, you're going to be building your own website and figuring out podcasting, I would be like, are you serious? Like, you're crazy. You're on something. But here we are. And I'm so appreciative of these new experiences because it's actually made me realize that I'm more creative than I gave myself credit for. I'm more willing to take chances in my music making now because designing a website, for example, I had no idea. I don't know how it's supposed to be done. I don't know. I didn't know that. I'm still learning under that umbrella of, good website design. It's still a work in progress, but because the website design, we'll just take that example for now, it taught me to take more risks and more chances and kind of ask, oh, is this possible? What about this? Pulling other people into my orbit and saying, let me pick your brain about that. So then going into being a teacher, right? What are the possibilities? What have I always known? And what can I kind of manipulate or take a risk on with this student? And in my own playing, ooh, what about that? And, being an entrepreneur, being a businesswoman has actually taught me that I am way more creative than what I gave myself credit for. And not to sound redundant, but it's really true because when you have to put on that creativity cap and thinking, how would I design that class? How would I sell it? How would I connect with people? What is the organization? Because there's no blueprint. Like I'm sure there's classes out there that teach you how to design a remote class. But for me and my story, I just started designing remote classes because the pandemic and because I wanted to, and why not? Right. And through that process of creating those things under this business realm, I kind of took a step back and I realized look at that. there's more wiggle room here when I approach my flutes with these colors or the tempo changes or how I want to express myself as an artist, rather than always sticking. And of course, there's fundamentals, right? But instead of just always sticking to like, this is how it's always been done, right? And so that was my biggest takeaway between my two worlds and kind of merging them
Mm.
together.
Yeah, I found that really clicked for me in teaching because,
Hmm.
like my first inclination when I first started teaching flute was to go by the book because that's how I learned. You get like Rubank Elementary and then you just do lesson 1 to lesson 100 or whatever. And then you move on to the next book. And then when they're good enough to play rep, then you start introducing some standards.
Hmm.
And I think like more recently actually, no, yeah, in the past, like, year or 2 that I've, like, really started building my studio, so I had a lot of, like, on and off students while I was in college and stuff like that just to dip my toes into the world, but when I decided I was really gonna build my teaching studio, I think I learned so much from getting students who were from very, very different backgrounds at all different ages and levels of playing, had hugely different personalities. And now I get to just like play a game of like, oh, I think this student will really like if we did that. And
Mm.
like I have a young student who I started on the flute, and it was completely remote, actually. I did go and teach him a couple of in-person lessons when I was back in New Jersey, but for the most part, he started flute on the internet, which is like a really scary thing to
Yeah.
do. And also, he didn't like read notes or anything. Like, I think he played a little bit of music before, but we were really starting from scratch with this instrument and with, the classical music world. And one of the really fun things that I've done is kind of mix up the order that we've learned things in. So, like, sometimes he'll bring me like a
Hmm.
song that he wants to learn from like a video game that he really likes. And then he'll be like, teach me how to play this. And I was like, great, but you don't know any notes yet. Like, how are we going to do that? So what we do is like like we'll listen to the song together and then I'm explaining to him like the concept of notes as we go. And so he is learning what notes are what by associating them with a piece that he already knows and likes. And then we're notating after I just tell him what notes they are. He just like writes them down and then I'm showing him the fingers. But then I like notate them for him and we kind of put the notes in together. And so now he learns how to like read the notes. And then I'm like, okay, well, we started with all half notes, but now, some of these notes are longer than others. So let's talk about rhythm. And so it's this really cool like integrated way to start from scratch. And I think it really only works if you do that from the very beginning because by the time,
Hmm.
like, a classical musician's
Yeah.
mind is shaped in the, like, "All right, we go page 1, page 2, page 3, now we learn the next scale, now we learn the scale after that." It's really, really hard to snap out of it. So it's been really cool just, like, playing to what he likes, and after he learned, like, 4 notes or something, I noticed that, like, we did get him the book, but he wasn't
Hmm.
super interested in playing it. Like, playing out of the book. I mean, he just like, wants to have fun and he's a little kid. Like, we should do something more interesting, make it more like a game because he loves games.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, well, just, 4 notes, write a song, play
Yeah.
whatever you want, and then show it to me next time. And then we turned that into also like a notated piece that he could print out. And he had like notes and rhythms now built in too, because, every kid has like a sense of musicality. And so he was using complex rhythms without knowing what they were. But I think if I taught him, this is a quarter note, this is an eighth note,
I
write a
see.
song, he would probably go with like a much simpler rhythm because he feels
Yeah.
limited to what he knows that he can do versus just having full freedom to play whatever he wanted. And then I would explain to him what the rhythms look like later.
Yeah. How fun. Kudos
I
to
know, it's been
you.
great.
I love that. And it reminds me of Kathy Blocky's teachings. It's, how to incorporate music and for the child to feel it and see it as a game, embody the rhythm and hear the pitches, at a very young age, too. Yeah, that's where my mind went because she uses a lot of colors and characters and fun exercises in her methodology books. And yeah, why not make it a game, right? Music is life, and music just brings out the best of life. Starting them off at that young age, you're definitely right. It's imperative because then they realize, oh, wow, I can do this. And this can be enjoying and fulfilling without having to be like page one, page two. And
Mm,
then they realize, oh, wow, like the video game example that you gave, he had a
right.
connection to that piece, to that song, right? And for him to have that connection, that's extraordinary. Good for you to be a teacher and to see his interests and to bring it out.
Thanks. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
having the creativity built in, I think is so important. Like, I have a lot of baggage from going by the book
Mm,
and classical music inherently encourages a lot of rigidity and hierarchical thinking and in the box thinking because we're just trying to make things perfect and like line up exactly.
yep.
And so like I find myself now having all this musical training, like sometimes like stuck on how I can be creative with music because my
Mhm.
mind automatically connects playing the flute and playing music with doing all these things that I was trained to do.
Mm,
And so, like, I really want for my students to whatever degree that they want, because I also have some students that are very into, doing things in order and having things line up. But I like just encouraging students to think from these different perspectives. Cause I think when I was a student, I was always just like, I want to play it right. I just want my teacher to say that I played it right and that I played it
mhm,
well. And like, whatever they said, I was, like, super eager to try and do and execute, which was cool, but I never thought about why I was doing these things or, like,
mm,
how I can approach it or what the goal was. It was just like, "Well, my teacher said to do this, so I'm gonna take that and do the best that I can with what they said." And
mm,
so, like, I was missing a few links of, like connecting the purpose with the methodology. It was just like, well, I'm going to
yeah.
do what I was told.
Yeah. No, that's amazing that you've made that connection and at such a young age too. And then you can start implementing that within your studio right off the bat. Yeah, that's exciting. So, kind of shifting gears just a little bit, going back to your database. My question is outside of Budapest and getting that funding, I'm curious about your process and how you went about calling up outside of 360 because we have a unique relationship, calling up and asking these corporations for a corporate sponsorship for your database. And to me, it's extraordinary because what I love seeing about how you work, Serena, is you're willing and you're not afraid to take risks. You're not afraid to be like, well, I'm just going to call Flute Center of New York and see how it goes. And of course, you're prepared. Like we went through and just fine tuned the pieces of paper and the tiers and the price points and the invitation, how to enroll somebody and say, hey, is there a win-win here? So of course you were prepared, but at the same time, there's an element of courage and an element of risk taking because you don't know if they're going to say yes or no. But to me, like you just do it with so much poise. And it seems like, of course, we care to a certain degree what people may think or may not think of us, but it feels like you just like throw it out there. And if it hits, great. If it doesn't, you move on. And anyways, there's a lot of things here, but the point is you have been calling the small dogs, the medium dogs, the big dogs, and everything in between, asking for corporate sponsorships for your database. And is there anything that you've learned along the way? Anything that you want to share with the listeners? Because that's another soapbox that I get on from time to time. And I tell my 360 listeners, like, it doesn't hurt to ask. The worst
Right.
that can happen is that they say no. And through 360, I've been very blessed to work with over 30 different corporations. And I've learned a lot along the way. I've learned a lot about relationship building, finding the win-win-win for everybody involved, making the ask because they don't teach you that in music school. They teach you how to play the right notes in the right time, in tune. But this side of like the business and thinking entrepreneurially is something that was new for me. And I know you're learning as you go. But asking and putting that out there, the invitation to partner together, these are skills, at least for me, when I was in school, weren't taught. So anyways, I'm rambling, but the whole point is I want the listeners to know that you are actually in the weeds asking corporations to fund your database, to fund your podcast. And I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud that you are able to say, hey, this is what I have to offer. This is my value. Do you want to partner with me? So anything that you want to talk about in regards to corporate sponsorships, anything that you think is vital for the listeners to know, feel free to share away.
Well, I think you're giving me too much credit for being courageous because I'm actually quite an overthinker. And to the point that, like, anybody that I've asked, I've really thought through, like, are our values all aligned? Like, how is this going to benefit them? How is it going to benefit me? Like, do we have any sort of connection? Does it make sense for them to be on the database? Like, I don't think I've asked as many people as maybe I could have. And I think there's pros and cons to this, and I'm sure that you can speak to that. But I really was super thorough in, thinking through who would want to be on the database, who it makes sense to have, and whose values we connect with and really align with what we're trying to do.
Mhm.
And as a result of that, actually, I think the first, 3 or more people that we asked all said yes. But I know that rate isn't normal, because normally you're really supposed to ask more, like way more people and businesses to do. But I think that's another element that we talked about in terms of playing to your strengths, is like, because I'm an overthinker, this is how I operate, and it works for me. And then,
Hmm.
like, having a teammate, like, I have a teammate who's a lot more like, okay, when we're reaching out, we should be like 100% about things. And so, like,
Hmm.
as we're reaching out to people to, like, talk to about the database, or, like, institutions to share with their students, he's doing the thorough work of, like, all right, literally every school, we're going to email every school. And so, like, my brain doesn't work that way. It's hard for me to do that. And so, like, I kind of played to what I know and started with the people that I felt really certain would like my message and
Mm.
care and resonate. Even if they weren't in a place to sponsor us, I was like, all right, does it make sense to be asking? So yeah, it's a little bit of a different approach, but I think that, like, to start out, that worked really well for me, because then I got a few yeses right off the bat to really make me feel ready to continue.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. No, and that's why it's working for you. Like you said, maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't, who knows, be asking more businesses, but hey, I've asked 4 and I've received 4 yeses, right? But that overthinking is helping you definitely, because you're not asking just anyone. You are putting in thought in the sense of, is there brand alignment? Is there a vision and a mission alignment between the two companies? Because if you can't see it, then it's not going to work. It's like me reaching out to Kitty Chow and saying, hey, Parina, can you be a 360 sponsor? But, as fitting as it is, I'm wearing a cat shirt right now. And I know Serena has a special place for cats in her heart as well. Maybe my 360 listeners would really appreciate a Kitty Chow ad. But for the most part, I think it's going to put a bad taste in their mouth, right? By chance. So by you thinking, okay, which company is in alignment with my database, that is being really strategic and smart about it, but then piggybacking off of that idea, right? So you really strategically thought, okay, Food Center of New York, Elizabeth Rowe, whoever your other sponsors are, they would be a great fit for this database and what we're doing. My point too is, okay, so you had this thought, Food Center of New York. All right, great. But you're not letting that name or their reputation or their bigger than life energy deter you. You're still knocking on the door and saying, hey, Food Center of New York, I know you're probably one of the largest food shops in the world. And here I am with a database. Would you be interested? You're still knocking. That's the courageous part that I'm talking about. You're still knocking on their door. So is there any piece of advice that you would offer a 360 listener? Like, you've done your work, you know your price points, you know your pitch, you know that X company and Y company would be in a good alignment together, a lot of people get stuck there and they don't knock.
Mm,
They don't
right.
knock. And they know they hold value. They know that their thing is like the bee's knees, but they don't knock on Flute Center of New York's door or another flute shop store or whatever because, oh, that's FCNY. Ooh, or that's Haynes, or that's Powell, or that's Straubinger. Who am I? Do you have any piece of advice, anything that's kind of spinning in your head along this realm?
I mean, I definitely feel that fear, and I think it's normal to feel that fear. But I guess for me, like, once you do all the overthinking that you really can do, and, like, you really, like, write out your thoughts very clearly in an email or however you prefer to communicate, then you can kind of find peace in it being out of your hands, right? Like, if I've done all of the research and all the work and I truly believe in, the mission and that we can collaborate together and I've explained that clearly, then I feel like even if they say no, there's no, like, doubts or regrets that I came off as tacky or that, like, my project isn't worthwhile because I've communicated what I wanted clearly and what I believe the collaboration could be clearly. And so then it's up to the other party, it's like we talked about in the beginning with talking to strangers, it is a two-way street. And like as long as you show that you believe in it and that you're not just asking because you want money, like I think that is the biggest fear, right? Like we are afraid that we're coming off as like overly demanding or like coming off as just wanting to get something out of them.
Mm,
But if you've done that work and you've communicated why you're asking them and it makes sense and it's sincere, then I think even if they say no or they don't get to your email and they don't respond, it's like that's out of my hands. I've already done what I could do.
yeah. Oh, I love it. And the other thing that I would add to that is I'm more fearful of the regrets. I'm more fearful of not taking that chance because,
Mm.
in opportunities in the past seasons of my life, I would have contemplated, ooh, should I do that competition? Ooh, should I reach out to that person? And then, because I'm human, just like everybody else, I'd be like, ooh, there's too much fear. I'm not going to do that. Who am I? And then 2, 3, 4 months later, I look back on that and think, you know, darn it, I really wished I would have sent that email. I really wished I would have made that call. And that to me is the stickler. To me, that is what I'm afraid of the most. Not taking chances, not creating those opportunities, not
Mhm.
knocking on the door because I hate, not that I have, I mean, I just don't like living with regrets. And we are all going to not make mistakes. I'm using that term very loosely, but I want to have a life and create a life where I can look back and be like, I took that risk. I now know the outcome because I asked rather
Yeah.
than wondering what could have been.
Honestly, that goes for everything. I think the only reason not to do something you wanna do is if it takes away from something more important,
Very
right?
true.
If it doesn't take away from anything else that you're doing, then why aren't you doing it?
Oh, I could talk about that for forevermore. A great point in this conversation now is to talk about the Ultimate Music Business Summit because not only are you an intern, but you are also one of our 30 presenters for UMBS 2023. And I'm so proud to have you on board because your proposal was stellar. I love your topic, the title, and yeah, tell the listeners a little bit about what you're going to be presenting on for UMBS 2023 so that way they can get excited with us.
Sure. So, my presentation is called The Winding Path, and I really want to, get the message out and show people who are feeling lost like I did when I graduated from undergrad or even now because I'm still finding my way, like what it means to piece together, opportunities and live in the present and not worry too much about what the final goal is because I think the biggest lesson that I've learned so far from everything that I've done is that most of the coolest things or the greatest things you could do or the greatest opportunities that have come my way have not been something I could plan for
Mm,
because, you know, a lot of the things, like I wouldn't have known about going to Budapest. I wouldn't have known about, being able to speak at the University of Maryland if I hadn't just started the podcast. And so there was no way for me to say like, oh, I'm going to start this podcast so that, in 1 year I can go speak at a university. And then in the year after that, I can win a grant. Like there was no way to map that out and say like, this is my ultimate goal with podcasting. And I think it's the same for any kind of creative career. Like, I don't know where my flute career is going, but also I think like for me to land somewhere fulfilling, it it can't be an option that I can plan for because that means that it already exists and I want to create my own path and I like don't necessarily want to have something that is option A, B, or C and this is how you get there.
Hmm.
So I think piecing these opportunities together, finding like the sense of what direction to go in so that you can have the momentum so that those surprising, amazing moments can appear in your life and that you're ready for them and to take those
Hmm.
opportunities when they come is really important. And so I'm kind of formulating my presentation around that concept.
Hmm. Yeah, I can't wait to hear it. I'm gonna digest every second of it. I love it. And then in terms of you are one of our 2 UMBS interns. So literally y'all, like when I said that there are a lot of layers here between Serena and I was not lying. You and John are doing phenomenal work and thank you for being so patient with me and gracious in my craziness in this season that I'm in. And yeah, so tell the listeners a little bit about what you're doing as a UMBS intern.
Yeah, so I found the internship on Facebook, also another like random surprising opportunity. I guess Heidi and I had connected on Facebook just cuz, like most flutists, we just add each other if it shows up. And then I saw that you had a corporate internship open. And that was like exactly the moment in my life that I was like, how am I going to fund my database? So I was like, and I had no idea where to start, like that's asking for money was not something I was super comfortable with. And it's also
Hmm.
something that like I had never learned how to do, like working with companies or businesses. So I was like, this is the perfect opportunity for me to, check out UMBS, see what it's about, help them out, but then also learn the skills that I need to do my project. And the team has been really, really amazing. And, I started off just kind of like shadowing Heidi and seeing what you were doing. And then eventually, I did like my own reaching out. I did the reaching out to a lot of podcasts for our kind of collaborations with, trading like having their logo and recognition on the UMBS website for being able to talk about UMBS and spread the word on their podcasts. And I also have been helping kind of scope out what businesses would be interested in sponsoring the summit because it is a big ordeal. Like we have to pay for the platform. There's a lot of back end work that goes into it. And so, like, seeing the behind the scenes of how to interact with different businesses, what their needs are, and
Hmm.
like, yeah, just the sheer amount of work it takes to put together an event like this has been really, really like eye-opening for me.
Yeah, and I continue to learn along the way too. That's why I said yes immediately 2 years ago to Garrett and Arthur because those 2 guys keep sharpening my iron. You know, the saying iron sharpens iron. And even, like what you said about what goes on behind the scenes of these talks and discussions with corporations. What I've learned a lot throughout my corporate sponsorship journey is, for example, there's room for negotiations. And I've been negotiating with X company back and forth, and we all have, right? But kind of going into the Slack messages and emails, and this person said this, what about this? How can we accommodate them? And finding that win win, like we were talking about earlier. And Arthur, as much as he is my dear friend, he's also, I see Garrett and Arthur as mentors too. We're colleagues and friends, but I'm still learning so much, being on this executive team and watching them. And my point is, Arthur lovingly called me the other day and he said, "Hey, Heidi, you did great. And I don't envy what you do, But I noticed the language around money that you had when you were talking to X person about negotiations. Next time, try XYZ. Or you can kind of leave out ABC. And he was schooling me in a very loving way about how to approach money, how to approach finances, how to approach negotiations with these companies. And I had a foundation, but we're always learning, right? And just fine tuning the process, fine tuning me is something that I so appreciate about those guys. They constantly make me want to be a better businesswoman, a better musician, a better person. And yeah, so just piggybacking off of what you said about just the journey and seeing how much goes into it and all of that, I'm just really appreciative of the opportunity too.
Yeah, no, I like seeing how the team operates and how there's always room for anybody's input and ideas, and like also that everybody, leaves each meeting every week and does like pretty much individualistically does all the pieces that are required of them or comes up with their own ways to solve the problems that each of us said we would solve.
Mm,
It's like a really smooth operating machine, like I felt
mm,
like there was no, like, micromanaging or, like,
mm.
oh, hierarchy, like, "Oh, you're an intern, so you can't say this or you can't try that." It's
Yeah.
very much like, "Yeah, if you have an idea, like, go for it, and we'll see what happens." And I really like that because I think that allows me to, feel like I'm being useful.
Oh, yeah, and we wouldn't want it any other way because you and John have so much input and feedback that you can offer us. And that's why I say, and that's why I said at the beginning of the conversation, I feel like I learned from you. And I feel like I'm your student in a lot of ways because having that environment of openness and an environment where we can bounce ideas off of each other, I think is really fulfilling for all of us. Yeah. So, since Serena and I are both on this UMBS team and journey together, we are personally inviting you to the Ultimate Music Business Summit 2023. And the dates are January 5th, 6th, and 7th, 2023. And you can go to musicsummit.biz, that's musicsummit.biz. And we have different price points. We have 3 different tiers. And then the student rate kind of cuts everything in half. So you can, for your budgetary needs, find the right price point, the right ticket price that fits well for your budget, because we know being a student, sometimes cash is hard to come by and it fluctuates with books and all of that jazz. So we really wanted to meet you where you're at. And you can check that out. Also, Arthur has uploaded the schedule, the 30 presenters, and you'll see Serena's beautiful picture there under the presenters and the different topics, when they're going to be presented, days and times. It's a 3-day event, and we would absolutely love to see you there.
Yeah, so I wanted to say for students and for recent graduates, like this kind of summit and all the information and the presentations that are in it, I think are a lot of the things that I wish that I had learned going through music school because, it's important to hone in on your craft and get as good at your instrument or your different musical skills, but the piece that's missing is like, how do you turn that into a career? Like, how do you market yourself? How do you make money and sustain yourself doing what you went to school for, which is also your passion?
Mm,
And so I think it's a really crucial thing to learn, and it's so multifaceted, right? Like music business is not just one thing. There are so many different elements to marketing yourself, managing your finances, taking care of all the bits and pieces. And so a summit like this I think can really get your foot through the door to
mm,
understand a whole new world of what it means to be a musician that we sometimes, as we come out of school, are floundering to figure out.
mm. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And the older that I'm getting when I go to these different music conventions and summits, something like NASM, you go in and you realize, oh, wow, there are so many different trajectories to or for a musician's career. No two careers have to look alike. And that's something that I really appreciate because then again, there's this space for creativity. Like, how do I want to form my career? And you're right, UMBS is a resource to help get your foot in the door, to start getting a taste and kind of dipping your big toe into the pool and noticing like, oh, do I like this? Do I want to kind of explore that? And maybe it's a little bit of everything and having this portfolio-esque career, and realizing that the market is shifting where I think musicians have to think and act more entrepreneurially is never been more noticeable and obvious to me that we have to be equipping our students with this knowledge of music business. And you're right, like hopefully there are some schools out there who are starting to get on the bandwagon, like Berkeley Music. They're starting to implement more music business into their programs for their students, and hats off to them. But you're right, this is not talked about enough in music school. And I can get on that soapbox. My listeners know I can get onto that soapbox forever and ever. And it's awful. I really think it's really awful, just because like we are doing a disservice to our students by not, we're promising them these jobs on the other end, on the other side of graduation. But, these traditional jobs are there, but the market is overly saturated with highly qualified musicians, and we're all to some degree qualified for those few jobs. So what's going to happen, and we talked about this through creative baggage. It's like this pie, like this beautiful blueberry pie, and this ever so slight, sliver of this pie is 1% to 2%, and we're trying to cram thousands of music graduates into that little sliver. And that's not practical. But what about the other 98% of the pie, right? And there's abundance there, and there are beautiful creative and financial opportunities for all of us to take and to embark. But the whole point is, I'm really excited to hear you say, like, UMBS is giving those musicians and those music students an opportunity to see what is possible and to start adding that knowledge of business skills to our wheelhouse, so that way we can all be that much more successful.
Right. Yeah, I think it's ridiculous that we're fed this like starving artist mentality from such a young age, because I feel like it's easy to accept that when you're like, 16, 18, whatever, going to I was like, yeah, fine, I'll just be a starving artist. Like I want to play flute, like whatever. And so like then throughout your undergrad, you don't necessarily like mind that your school isn't giving you other skills, because you're like, well, the other skills don't matter because I'm just going to be poor anyways, or whatever, like I'm just going to grind and like, like do whatever, everything it takes to like get that one job that I need. But I feel like that kind of blindsidedness takes away accountability from the institutions that are responsible for creating qualified musicians. And I don't think creating a qualified musician is just about teaching students, how to play. Like most students come in already knowing how to play, and they're going to get better in music school, but that doesn't make them a professional. And I think that like that accountability needs to be there. I think it's important for students to recognize that and demand that from their schools, because otherwise like schools aren't going to change anything if they can get away with it. If their students are happy, just, we just have to give you some practice rooms and a teacher, and we don't have to worry about developing an entrepreneurial course or a course on career building, then they're not going to.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. And I'm kind of very heated. I'm sensing that because of your experience, right? You're almost, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, you're almost kind of demanding. You're like, hey, where is your accountability? And I feel that much heated on that topic as well, too. Right. Even being an educator, and being a little further, just because I'm older, being a little further on in my journey, you kind of look back at the different programs and stuff. And because I think there's a good like 15-year gap between you and me, the one perspective that I can add, I think, and maybe they're playing, I'm going to be very blunt. I'm just going to throw it out there. Who cares? Maybe they're playing a little dumb in the sense of like, I like to give people the benefit of the doubt, that I'm wondering if to a certain extent, they just don't, I mean, they know to a certain extent, but I wonder if they just don't know. Because these academics who've been in the industry for so long, 20, 30, 40 years, they were told, and I think the turning point literally is like, I'm an old millennial. Okay. I'm more like a Zennial, where it's like in between, I think it was Generation X and Millennial, like there's a subcategory of Zennial in between. I'm more of a Zennial, but I'm an older millennial. And I think literally, like, I'm the last generation to have either been on either side of the fence going into the traditional, like the graduating
Mm,
class for me could have easily been either thrown into that traditional or down that traditional path or being an entrepreneur. And I
right.
think that was the cusp. I think that's like and I don't have anything to back that up other than my own observations. And then anything after me, anybody who's graduating after getting their doctorate, especially now, and then your generation, now it's really apparent. Now it's like, now your generation, the 20-year-olds are voicing it. And I'm so excited as a 30-year-old to hear that, because I'm like, yes, because they can, and I'm hoping that they're going to hear your voice, because I'm coming out as, somebody with a professional degree, and they're seeing somebody like me not getting that traditional job and saying, oh, well, you didn't make the cut. But now this new generation coming out, and there's an abundance of you, and for your voice and for your ideas to keep going out there, and for you to be spreading this message, they might hopefully hear your voice over my small. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because now it's going to be more apparent, and hey, we might need to start changing this, because it really wasn't like a problem for my generation, because like when they were training me, my professors, their market and their reality was much different than my reality and our reality. It was, you go and get that doctorate and you get one of those two jobs. And they kind of, in a weird way, I don't know what it is. I don't know if they don't want to face the reality of, hey, we need to start equipping our students with new skills. I don't know if they have their blinders on so tight where it's like, it's still one of those two jobs. What are you talking about? Where, they have no idea. I don't know what it is. And I would like to think that perhaps they don't have all the facts, you know? And that's shameful, right? Because like you said, they need to be held accountable, especially if like, an oboe performance degree is going to cost somebody their bachelor's, master's, and
Right.
doctorate, and going to cost $200,000 and
Right.
take 10 plus years to get those 3 degrees. Like, that's not enough anymore to be able to play your oboe well. It's not, because you're a dime a dozen. And what if you can't get one of those two jobs? What are you going to
Right.
do? So I hope there was some sense in all of that, but I get heated about it too, Serena. I really do, because the hat that I wear the most is being an educator. And I
Mhm.
feel like my main responsibility and role on this earth is to educate and to give students the knowledge that they need in order to thrive. And I think that should be the heart of every educator, to make sure that they're going to be putting the student out into the world, right, with everything that they need to have to be well equipped. So,
Right.
anyways, there's a lot going on here, but if there's anything that you want to kind of add to it, feel free.
No, that totally resonates, and I think maybe the most like, the more cynical way to look at it is that, like, this idea that we keep perpetuating of, like, making the cut or not making the cut, because I think we all have this fear, just how traditional classical music is, it's like, well, if you don't get
Yep.
that job, then you didn't make the cut, but I think creating that fear in students from the beginning of their undergrad makes it easy for students to not think about doing anything else, because they just are worried about being one of the people that do make the cut, because nobody wants to think that they're not gonna make the cut.
Yep.
Like, so that black and white, like way of thinking, I think, allows people to not do more, and it allows our
Hmm.
industry to not change, and so I am glad that things are changing now and that, like, people are thinking about it more, but I think it will take a very long time for that perception to fully go away of, like, well, you were one of the ones who didn't make it in the traditional sense, because
Hmm.
I think that's silly, like, I battle with this all the time, and I don't even really want to make it in the traditional sense. But I have had
Yeah.
so many friends. I'm like, do you actually want to play in an orchestra? Or like, do you actually want to like go through the
Mm.
audition process? Do you actually want to be a professor? They're like, well, not really. Or like in some ways, like, you know, if it was just handed to me, I would love to do it. But even like just the thought of like not doing it makes you want to throw up a little bit because it's so, right? Like
Yeah.
you don't even really want it, but not doing it makes you feel yucky because you think that that's the only way.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And even when you do, to kind of throw another element to this is even when you do make the cut, whatever that means, like I was offered a full-time job outside of Shanghai, China. I
Right.
worked I did 2 years of applying to everything under the sun to find the right fit for me. And then even being offered that traditional job, life happens. It was taken away from me. And I'm so
Right.
glad that it was. And at the time, it was devastating. I am not going to lie. Like, I threw my fit and I
Right.
was a terrible, 2-year-old throwing a temper tantrum. But, in hindsight, it's so amazing because I am a believer. I really feel that God had a huge hand in this. I'm happy to be on this side of being an entrepreneur and being at the age that I am with the knowledge that I have, because I feel like with people like you and Garrett and Arthur and the other musicpreneurs in the world, we are in the weeds figuring this out and being a pioneer and saying, all right, nobody taught us, but guess what? We're going to take it upon ourselves to figure it out so that way others can thrive, so that way others can make it. We can shine a light onto that path and say, all right, all right. And you're right, it's going to take some time. I think it's going to take 10 to 20 years. If I'm being very
Right.
honest, I think it's going to take so the middle ground is 15 years. I think it's going to take a good 15 years, but there has to be a lot of legwork has to happen, right? And then when that system, if it shifts or pivots or falls down or whatever it's going to do, we've got this foundation laid out for the future music generations to fall back on and to say, oh, okay, and then it's set up and we're ready to go. Because if we don't figure it out, if we're not in the weeds doing the thing, getting messy with it, then who else will, And there's a lot of people out there. I'm just calling us, the 3 to 4 people within our inner circle, but like Catherine Eminent and Nicole Ricardo and Jenna Engel. There are so many music entrepreneurs out there that I'm learning from, and I'm so thankful that they are willing to take those risks and be courageous, for all of us. So it's going to take a community. We can't like axe down this tree, just one person. Like all of us need to take out the chainsaws and start going, because it's
Right.
a massive redwood. I really feel that way anytime I'm kind of embarking in this new journey. So yeah.
Yeah. And like we're doing all these amazing things, but at the end of the day, we're putting duct tape on a building that's falling down, right? Like we
Yes.
can't
Yes.
like we shouldn't have to be doing like the database, the summit, all that stuff. It's awesome. And we came in and we created it because there was a need. But like, honestly, in an ideal world, like a lot of these things you would just learn going through school.
Yeah.
And you would, you could have like extra workshops, you can supplement, you can, have a place to continue finding opportunities. All that's great. But like in an ideal world, if you get a degree, if a school accepts you and then gives you a diploma and you paid the money or you got your scholarship, then you should be able to reasonably have a job
Yeah.
doing what you studied. Like that's
Oh.
how it works for every other profession.
Yeah. What? Mind blown? What is that? Yeah, no, you are dead right. And I challenge you, and I don't know, I don't have a crystal ball, but because of exactly what you said, enough people are going to realize, like your generation and even the generation to come in, they're going to realize because they understand this problem, the very thing we're talking about, they're going to realize and start contemplating, is it even worth for me to get that diploma to hang up on the wall to say I can play an instrument?
Right.
I think the UMBSs, and this is a bold statement, so nobody come at me, it's just because this is where I'm at. the pivoting musician courses, the UMBSs, the other things that are out there, the things that the musicpreneurs are doing out there. I think that is going to be our new educational system. I think musicians are going to realize that I don't need that traditional music degree because
Right.
it doesn't have weight. It's literally a piece of paper that cost me $100,000 and there's no ROI to it. I think you can easily, like the year that I studied with Don Bailey before I entered into my DMA program was probably one of the most fulfilling musical years of my life of flute growth through and through. Why can't you create, like, if that piece of paper holds no weight and there's no jobs on the other end that the schools are promising you, why? I think the whole system is going to shift where, like, that upcoming flutist is going to say, forget that traditional route because they're pushing, graduates out into a market where I'm not going to get that job. Why can't I study a year or two with somebody,
Right.
who knows my instrument and then cobble together and study with the Garrett Hope here on copywriting, study website design with Arthur Brewer. And they kind of just formed their right. And then they
Right.
cobble this together and they've designed their own curriculum. Or so all that's to say is the system is broken. And we are talking about how the system is broken and what's going to do and how is it going to unfold, right? So if the traditional school, if they don't like actually start implementing these things and finding the solutions that we're talking about, I think it's going to crumble. I really think it's going to crumble and fall to the wayside. And what's next? It's going to be studying with the doers. It's going to be kind of like take a class here, take a course there, because why not? It's going to be probably 10 times cheaper and more effective because these are the musicpreneurs who are, I keep saying this statement, but it's so true. Like they're in the mud, they're in the weeds, they're doing the thing, and then they can mentor you and come alongside you for you to thrive in today's market, not what it was 30, 40 years ago. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a bold statement, but I really think like the actual educational system is not going to look how it looks right now in the next 10 years.
No, it can't because
Yeah.
they have to also, pivot to survive if they want people to continue to go. So I think they will. I think things are changing and schools will change, but it's slow because they're schools. They're in
Yeah,
schools.
yeah. But I don't think most schools are, what I'm trying to say, the boldness in my statement is I don't think most schools will pivot.
Hmm.
That's what I'm trying to say. I don't think they are going to pivot. I think they are going to be steadfast in their ways. This is the way we've always done it, right? And people are not going to attend. Because when you enroll into a school, that's a business. They're
Yep.
asking for your money.
Right.
But if
That's
the
the biggest
business,
thing. Schools are businesses. Like
yeah.
they act like they're supposed to be about something different, and like maybe back in the day or in other places in the world, it is just about education. But like
Mm-hmm.
in the U.S., higher education is an industry. It's a business.
Yes.
They're companies basically.
Yeah. And if the business can't deliver, why would people keep going back to the business?
Yeah. No, they have to figure it out.
Yeah.
If they don't,
Yeah.
like it's sink or swim. And I think it's interesting to see, like, even reaching out to all these schools about our database. There are certain schools where a lot of administrators respond to us and certain schools where we hear crickets. And it's like
Yep.
very clear which schools care and which don't.
So really what we're doing is we're doing a public service to the schools. And if there's any, if there's any school out there listening and the admin's listening, like we're doing you guys a favor. We're telling you where you need to go. But if you're not willing to go there, that's fine because, then this new system is going to rise, which I think
Yeah.
is exciting.
No, definitely. It's someone's always going to fill the need, I think, which is what's really cool about people. Like we're always looking for new ways to, solve the problem or do it better or do it different.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Well, Miss Serena, I have taken up way too much of your time. I told you it was going to be 2 hours. I knew it was because I knew that we had so much in common. And I just wanted to pick your brain further about your career and everything. So thank you for being so willing to give so much of your expertise and time up to the 360 listener. And we so appreciate you.
Thank you for having me on. It's been real fun.
Yeah, definitely. And you are always welcome on the show. And you and I are going to see each other very soon, probably in the week for another UMBS meeting. So, but yeah, be thinking about future collaborations because I think this is just the start.
Definitely.
Thank you so much for listening to this 2-part series. Friendly reminder, you want to take advantage of your 25% discount by using your code December25 at our website, musicsummit.biz. That's musicsummit.biz. So now to make everything easy peasy for you, I have provided all the details and the links in the show notes below. So again, you want to take advantage of this incredible time because we want to see you thrive in 2023. Now, this is an annual event, right? So you don't want to miss out on oodles of information from 30 plus experts to help get your music business off the ground. Okay, so again, go to musicsummit.biz, claim your basic, student, or VIP ticket, use your December 25 code, and we will see you there. Thanks.
Let's talk about Flute.